Hello guys, welcome back to another tech video on my channel. How are you guys doing? I hope you guys doing well and fantastic. So with NestJS, we know how to create a project, we know why we use NestJS, and we know how to use a DTOs, and also now we know how to do the error handling and also validation. So now the one more step we can go, which is a persisting data on a real database. I got like few requirements asking I go with the SQL database using TypeORM, and some people asked me to go with the NoSQL database like a MongoDB. But due to my personal reason, I'm going to go with MongoDB with mongoose, right? So this is due to my personal reason. Though this I selected this based on a personal reason, this is kind of a requirement in the field, in the industry, because there are a lot of tutorials explaining how to use a TypeORM with MySQL or PostgreSQL, right? But very less tutorial you can find with about MongoDB. Though you have the tutorials with the MongoDB, they use plain MongoDB or the plain mongoose implementation. But NestJS has their own mongoose implementation to use on MongoDB database, right? So we need to use that. So today I'm going to show you how you can use NestJS mongoose wrapper with the MongoDB database, right? For that, for easy of use, I don't have Mongo installed on my machine, so I use cloud.mongodb.com, which is the MongoDB cloud version. You can use that. There's a free version for that. You can use for like your basic stuff and your testing and your learning purpose and everything. You can use that. It's a free. You can go and sign up and you can create your own database. The URL is cloud.mongodb.com, right? So now you can see I have an empty database called EMS, and I have a like empty collection. I created that because it must create a collection, but I'm not going to use that. I don't have any data, right? So what we're going to do is, in my application, right, we have implementation to like keep the data on a local in-memory array. So we are going to push this to database through mongoose, right? So when you use mongoose with the NestJS, you have two options. Either you can use a plain mongoose driver or a plain mongoose implementation, or else you can use NestJS mongoose wrapper. I highly recommend you to use a NestJS mongoose wrapper, because then you can like avoid a lot of boilerplate codes, right? You can avoid a lot of unnecessary code, and you can keep your code clean. Plus, in case if you want, you can use plain mongoose implementations as well within your code, right? There is nothing, no restriction. So today what we are going to do, we are going to use this employee, we are going to put into the database, plus I'm going to show you how to deal with the one-to-many relationships as well, because that is a kind of again area where we lack of examples and lack of implementations on that area. So I'm going to do that as well, right? One-to-many relationship with mongoose. Then you can do the many-to-many relationship with yourself. Okay. First thing is first, and okay, before that, I want to show you, we can go to an SJS Mongo page, right? There are a bunch of examples and they explain how we can do this, right? So before we start, I need to install this to my project. So I'm going to go npm I and NestJS mongoose and mongoose, right? Mongoose is the standard mongoose implementation, and NestJS mongoose is the wrapper for that. Okay, right. So installation done. So now what we need to do is we need to import this to our project, right? So we learn this, we need to go first to do the app module, right? So that is the place you can import whatever you need, right, to your project. So I'm going to use mongoose module, right? And I'm going to implement here for root, because then I can give my data, I can give my connection string here, that can applicable throughout the project, right? So how I can get connection string? So I'm going to go to my cloud database and connect. I'm going to go here with connect application. So then they give this one, right? So you can copy this. And in case you are doing with your own database, this may be slightly different, right? So then I can use this one. So this is the URL string. For now I don't have any options. So here I need to pass my username and password, right? If you want, you can keep this in a separate file, right? So that's a usually practice. Let me do that. So rather, without taking here, I'm going to create a new file called constant. Right. Export. Okay, so here I need to pass the username and password. Username is NestUser. Password I gave as a NestCat. So don't write this password with this connection string. Because I'm going to delete this database before we go live. So database I'm changing to EMS, right? So that's it. And then I can use this here, Mongo connection. Okay. So that's it for here. I just set up the connection, right? So now, so far what we do is we have an employee model, right? But with the when we go to database, we have to use entities, right? So that is how ORM work, object relational mapping. So you can use TypeORM even for MongoDB, right? Because though it's object relational mapping, though don't use the MongoDB don't use the object, you can deal with it, but MongoDB has its own implementation as mongoose, right? So mongoose is the most popular implementation for MongoDB, right? So what is the benefit of mongoose? So when you use the MongoDB plain, it doesn't depend on any schema. Like for example, your employee can have a name, address, telephone number in one document, name, telephone number, city, and some other information in another document, and there can be only name in one other document. You can have multiple things, right? So what mongoose does is it can template your data, right? So because though it's a schemaless, you can make it to work as a schema, right? You can say, hey, employee object, only these properties you have in the employee object, right? So if you're trying to save something which doesn't belong to your schema, it won't go to your database. It won't create on your document, right? So that is the good part here. So now we need to create, because we don't need this, I'm going to comment this, right? And then we have to do so many refactors, because every places we use this employee as object, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create new file here to keep this constant, right? So create this enum employee.enum.ts, right? And then I'm going to move these enums over there, right? Because it is not a model file anymore, right? That's good. And then I'm going to create, right? I'm going to create a separate file called a separate directory called schema, right? So here, it's not required because I only have one schema, but as a setting to best practices, I'm going to do that. Employee.schema.ts, right? So here there are two different ways you can set up your schema. One, you can go with the plain Mongo way, right? So that means you can write here export const, right? So employee schema equal, right? And you can pass here your object, right? So you can pass here whatever, sorry, not this one. So I want to copy these properties, right? And I can paste it here. And then you need to make sure these with a capital S, because the simple S belongs to TypeScript, right? So Mongo data type is a capital S, right? So you can do this if you want, right? So this is perfectly fine, nothing wrong with this, but because this is the plain mongoose the mongoose way we implement this, right? But I'm going to show you the NestJS way, right? How we can go when you use the NestJS wrapper, right? So I'm going to comment this as well, right? So I'm going to export a class, export class employee. Okay, and here I'm going to export type employee document, well, employee and document, right? So this document you need to make sure you set mongoose document, right? Then otherwise you will get an error. Okay, so this should come here, not here. Okay, so now I can use this one, right? So I'm going to copy again from here, right? So now I can use this type script nature, right? I don't have to use mongoose data type, right? So I don't need to use. Instead of that, what I need to do is I need to use prop, right? So when I do the prop here, what really happens, right? So you need to make sure it's a MongoDB version, right? So what happens here, it automatically create the properties for you, right? So you don't have to worry about. So then you can use NestJS style within even your mongoose, right? I mean, it's kind of a one way, it's a personal preference. The second way, it make your code clean, right? Because when you use S with the capital, string with the capital S, number with the capital N, then later on if someone comes like not familiar with NestJS and the mongoose, then he will think, okay, one place is a simple string, another place is capital string, so what the difference, right? So this way you can write NestJS style the data type, but then internally it will convert to the mongoose style, right? So other than that, you can write, if you want, you can like put your some other properties here, right? For example, if you can say required, right? So if you want to say this is a required property, you can say it's a required true, right? So let's say put this to, right? You can set up this as a required true, right? So in a documentation, if you go to mongoose documentation, you can see what are the properties you can use, what are the options you can set for this prop, because that is not belongs to NestJS, that is come from mongoose. So whatever the schema properties you can use over there, you can do it here. I just set an example. Then I need to mark this as a schema, right? I need to mark this as a schema. Okay, so I think I used the wrong schema. So I need to use, okay, I think since it's already imported here, it doesn't allow me to import, right? I'm going to schema, so this one, right, mongoose schema. Okay, so now what it does is, so now your class is employee. So ideally this will map if you have any collection with the employee database, but what this does is it will add S after that and make it plural, right? So if you use employee, it will be employees. If you use student, it will be students, right? So once you do that, that's what will happen. Okay, so before anything, I want to see whether everything is working so far, but you remember I'm going to remove this employee model TS because we don't need this anymore, right? So when I use the delete this, though there will be so many places it will break, right? For example, especially employee controller will break, right? And yeah, create DT will break because these are coming from enum, right? Let me to quickly fix this. So the easiest way to fix this, I can run this program, right? And then I can go to each and every file, I can fix it, right? Okay, I think I fixed everything, right? So then ideally this should work, right? So yeah, it worked. So now we can see, I'm going to change my connection string little bit and to make sure it connect to database properly, right? So we can go to our properties and change this password little bit and run again, right? So this time it should fail if it is connecting to database, right? Yeah, it failed because that means it successfully connected to database. Okay, right. So now here onwards you need to use all the best practices, right? So now we can use this mongoose even inside the controller, right? And then, or you can create all your methods, or you can invoke all your mongoose method within your service, right? Or you can drop the service and you can create a repository, and you can use this mongoose implementation within the repository. It's completely up to you. If you are an architect, it's completely up to you, and if you are a software engineer, you need to talk to your architect how he prefer to do this. But the standard practice when we implement the backend services, the controller service and the repository. Controller is there to route the traffic and exception handling. Service is there to handle the business logic, and the repository is there to deal with the databases or any persistent storage, right? Any persistent technology you have, right? So therefore, we don't have a repository so far, right? I'm going to create that repository, but even within the Nest documentation, they don't encourage you must create a repository, right? If you go to NestJS documentation, so most of the time they use their mongoose or any ORM logic within the service. That is not wrong, but if you're really looking for extendability, right? Let's say later on you change this database to not the mongoose but for something else like PostgreSQL or MySQL, right? So then you don't have to touch service layer. You can rewrite your repository, and you can just peacefully switch these to your different database like MySQL or a PostgreSQL, right? So that benefit is there if you use separate repository layer, right? So therefore I'm going to do that. So you can see our project is keep getting cluttered. Right now I have all those controllers, modules, and everything is clapping inside here. So therefore when you do the real implementation, it's always better use the separate directories for the schemas, for the enums and everything, right? So then your life will make easy. Okay, so I'm going to create an employee repository here, employee.repository.ts, right? And employee repository. Okay, and then I'm going to decorate this with the injectable decorator, so then I can use this to, right? So then I can use this to inject into my service, right? So there's one more thing I need to do here. I'm going to stop this this one running, right? So there's one more thing I need to do here. I need to go to my employee module TS, and I need to import this employee repository, right? Also I forgot to do one thing here, right? So when you come to this schema, employee schema, we forgot to export this, right? We export the document, but we didn't export the employee enum itself, sorry, employee schema itself, right? So and meantime I had to tell, I push this code to GitHub repository. I'll put the link below, and I have a separate two directories. One directory I have a before database version, what between whatever the episode we have done up to the last episode, right, before the database, and this one will go to a different directory, because I'm going to change this structure a little bit and the files, and I'm going to delete certain files what we used to do in a previous project. So I'm going to keep this as a different project for you, right? I understand I could use branches, but I thought like it will be more clear to everyone if I use two different directories. Okay, right, what I need to do here, I need to export const employee schema equal new schema factory dot create for class, and I need to pass employee class. Okay, I don't need to use new keyword here. Okay, So now good, because I missed that part in a last time. Okay, right. First I need to do is I need to inject my model into this repository. How I can do that? In the constructor, I'm going to use inject model. This one, inject model decorator. Here I need to pass name for this. I'm going to use employee.name, and then I need to pass private employee model. Right, so this is a model. Right, so type of employee document. Right, so this one, and this is my constructor. Right, so now I can use this. I can use this anywhere within this repository, right? So now I'm going to implement whatever the methods I need to come into this repository. First, I'm going to implement the create and find all probably, right? So then I can see how this works. So these methods, so you need to understand when I use the database operation, so all those database operations are asynchronous, right? So therefore you need to handle the promises, right? So you need to wait until the operation complete. So I'm going to use the async await. It's easy and very clear, right? So create, and here we can get create employee model, right? Create employee DTO. It's a type of employee create DTO, I think. Yeah, this one, right? So this needs to return, since this is an async method, this needs to return employee, but as a promise, right? So employee as a promise. Okay, so this is my method, right? So you need to, when it comes to here, create, some people write this as a create employee, add new employee or whatever, but we have something called separation of concerns, and the employee repository always only belongs to do anything with the employee, right? It is not supposed to do with the project, it's not supposed to deal with something else. So therefore, just a create is enough, because in employee repository, if you have a create employee method, it's kind of redundant, right? And it's a personal choice, right? So here I'm going to create a variable here, new employee is equal so new this dot employee model dot create, right? And I'm going to plus employee create DTO, right? Whatever I'm getting from here. So it says error. No, I don't need to give the create function, right? And then I can return, right, await. It is not must to put the await, because anyway this is async and I'm returning a promise from here directly. So I can use new employee dot save, right? So new employee dot save. So this will return the newly saved employee, and I'm going to return this, right? So you need to understand this newly saved employee has something called ID, right? Because every document go to MongoDB, Mongo give a ID which is a object ID. So here I think I made a small mistake. So this should be this variable, not the type. Okay, right, cool. So now we need to go back to service, right? And here we have a create employee method, right? So now we don't need to do this employee push or whatever this we are going to do. We are doing here. Instead of that, we can directly say write like this: return this dot. Okay, I need to inject the employee repository to here, right? So to the okay, we don't have a constructor here. And I'm going to remove this one, right? And I'm going to create a constructor, and I'm going to return inject employee repository to here, right? So it's a type of employee repository, this one, right? And I'm going to put a private so I can use it here. This dot employee repository dot create, and I need to I modified the wrong code. Anyway, I want to change it, so I'm just going to comment it now. For now, this return here, this dot employee repository dot create, and I'm going to pass employee create GTO, right? So I need to do a small change here, right? I need to do a small change here. It just return classic employee, but I need to return this within a promise, okay? In a promise, okay? So same time, let me to change add the find all method as well. So I'm going to use async find all. Again, not necessarily to tell here it is a find all employees, because we are in employee repository, right? So this need to return promise of employee array, okay? And again return this dot await. I mean, it's good practice to use await here, right? Await this dot employee model dot find, right? So this is good. So now I go back to employee service and change my find all as well, this one, right? So return this dot employee repository dot find all, right? And here also this one should be promise, okay? This one, okay, I'm good with that employee here. So now these will like give me little trouble here, so I'm going to comment for now. So now I go back to my controller, right? I go back to my controller, and here again we have a little problem. Let's fix these first, right? So get all employees. For now I'm not going to deal with the search value here, so I'm going to comment this and I'm going to make it to a promise, right? So I'm going to make it to a promise, and then I can do here return this dot employee service dot find all employee service dot get all employees. I can do that, and yeah, I can make this method also as async, and I can use await here, right? So did I change this in the service? No, right? So service also I'm going to change like this, async and await and async and await. Since we are returning promise, we can skip await if you want, but it's good practice to use that, okay? Okay, that's cool. So now create employee. So here this dot employee service dot, so this again need to return promise of employee, right? So that's it, and I'm going to comment these methods for now, okay? We are good, right? So I think complete everything. So let's try to run this and see. npm run start dev, okay? Let's run and see what happened here. Did we miss anything or something? Okay, there are a bunch of errors. Let's see why it is. It says Nest can't find the employee repository dependency, but as I remember I added that. Let's go back and see employee module TS. It's here. Okay, by the way, I missed something else. Here I need to give my imports array. I need to use the mongoose module here, but here it's for feature, right? for feature, and I need to pass all the schemas here, right? It's a array of components, right? So then name would be employee.name, and schema is employee schema, right? So that has to be here, and then oops, what happened here? What is called? Okay, good. So now we are good. So let's go back here. Let's try to create employee, right? So now see, this is my payload. I'm going to create this. Oops, I get internal server error, right? Let's go back and here see why it is. User is not allowed to do action insert. Okay, cool. So this user is not allowed to do anything on the EMS, right? So let's go back and check from my here database access. This next user, go and edit, and yes, I type here SMS, it's a mistake, so let's update the user. Now user can do anything to EMS. Okay, good. Let's come back and try to insert this one. Okay, still I'm getting there. User is not allowed to do the action on the EMS employees. Okay, why is that? Next user has a right to do an EMS. I believe probably it might take some time, but because you're deploying your current changes, yeah, okay. So it says we're deploying, probably it may take some time, we'll see. Okay, good. Now let's go back and see. Yeah, now it works. Right now you can see it create new employee. So let me to create someone new, Brian Small, and consultant, right? So near the city is NC. Okay, so let's try to do this. So now I got two different records. So let's try to get employees, and now I'm getting all the employees back, right? So now it's really good and it's really working. Okay, so now you can now to do these update, delete and everything, right? So it's not a big deal. No, you can figure it out how to do that because we already done that, and you can just simply follow the documentation and get that done. I'm not going to kill your time on that, but I want to show you one thing, how we can use one-to-many relationship with this one, right? For that, I'm going to create ideally the vehicle should come from a probably a different module depend on your requirement, but I'm not going to do that for now because to save some time. So my objective is to show you how to use the one-to-many relationship. So let me to create those modules, the schemas and everything. So I'm going to create that schema in this module, right? So vehicle.schema.ts. So my scenario is this employee can have multiple vehicles, but the vehicle only can belongs to one employee, right? One-to-many relationship, right? So here the only different thing we need to do is, so let me to do the export class vehicle, right? So in this class I'm going to create few properties, right? So ID, it's a string, so let's do this also in the same way, right? And make is string, and model is string, and VIN number, that's also string, right? And I need to create here saying employee, right? Employee is type of employee, right? That is what we need to set here, and we need to set our prop, right? So we need to set up our props here, right? So within this prop, right? So within this prop, I need to configure. So let me to stop this running. Okay. So here I need to configure saying this is belongs to, right? This is the one-to-many relationship. This is belongs to different entity, right? So here I can set Mongo properties, and you can say type is equal. So let me to get the mongoose here. Import asterisk as mongoose from mongoose. Right, so here I can write mongoose dot schema dot types dot object id, right? That is my type, right? The type of this data, and then reference is, right? So reference is employee, right? So now it will go back and look for employee type and do this, right? So that is the only difference. So I'm not going to take your time to create this repository, service, and controller, right? So I can put into this existing one, but then it will not clear. So give me little time. I'll go back and fix that and come back to you. Okay, I think I'm done here. So let me to explain what I have done. So first so this one I created with you. I just created this export here and this type export in a vehicle document, right? So you already know this. And I did little refactor to my code. I mean the refactor in the sense I just move the code into different directories, so that in that way it's a little bit easy. So if you see here the schema I have, then I created a repository, right? So I have a vehicle repository now. So in the naming convention, it's kind of an opinion based. Usually we have file name all simple vehicle dot repository dot ts, which is a TypeScript file. But if you have a two words like employee repository, sometime let's say something like two words. If you have a two words for the name like new vehicle or something like that, or green vehicle or something like that, I don't know, nothing comes to my head where you have a two name for a object name. But if you have that, sometime it use dashes, so nothing right or wrong. But the standard usual way is you use file name with the all simple, and when you export the object, you export with the first letter capital. So that's a convention I followed, the vehicle.repository, and you have a vehicle repository export, and I marked as an injectable, right? So you know this part because we have done this together. So I use the inject model, and then I have a create, and then I have a find all, right? The same two method. So here I use async and await here. But if you don't use this, so if you don't use the await, it doesn't matter. It will work, because it's anyway in the async method always return promises. So since we define the promises return type, it won't do much different. But if you don't use async await at all, and then it will create a pending promise. Okay. So if you have this one, the service, and then we have vehicle service. The vehicle service, we inject vehicle repository, and then you have again create and get all, right? So again, I forgot to mention, though if you don't use async and await, so if you go back to here into this repository, the method we are using here, the save method, right? So it's return promise, right? So that is how they have designed that. So that's why we always return promises from here. And now the repository done. So then let's go back to vehicle controller. In the vehicle controller, we use the controller to create and also get all, right? And so now everything is ready. I use separate controller with the vehicle, and just I don't have a separate URL path. I take this from my body, right? It's all good as far as I can see. Okay, anyway, so let's go back and execute npm run start dev and see what happened. Okay, so meantime, let me to create a new request, and let's say create vehicle, it's a post request and with the JSON body. Okay, good. So let me to go back and quickly get this create vehicle DTO, and okay, I forgot to mention I created DTO. It's nothing to tell you, right? Okay, so let me to do this quickly. And ID I'm going to generate, so let's make it's a Honda, and then model, and let's say it's a fit, and win, let's create some random win. I don't worry, this is not some win, I mean it is not a real win. Okay, so employee ID, I need to get all employees from somewhere and use employee ID. Let's say I think I have this employee still, right? So get employee, I'm going to use this Brian, and I'm going to use that employee ID here, right? So all good. So let's try to send this. Okay, I forgot to put the URL. So get this and paste it here and mark it as a vehicles. Okay, so now all good. In my database I don't have any collection called vehicle, so let me to send this request. Oops, it did create a vehicle but without its body. Okay, I mean it didn't print the data. Of course, this is not a problem with async await. Okay, probably this don't understand this as a schema. Let's go back and see what's wrong with my schema. Yeah, I did mark this as a schema. It's my fault. Okay, it should tell this is a schema. Okay, right, now it should work. I think now it should work. Okay, let's go back and execute this. Yeah, it worked. Oops, I created two vehicle itself. Okay, it's fine. So let's refresh and see here. Yeah, I created one, and for now I'm going to delete this. Okay, good. So now I'm going to create a different vehicle under this name. Let's say right. So now you will see here when we go back to this data, right? So each employee, I have a problem here. Employee don't keep vehicle, sorry, employee ID. Vehicle don't have employee ID. Okay, so we need to go back and see why it is. So here it says as employee ID, and I think I know why it is. Okay, so because here I use as an employee, right? So that is the problem. Now let's do one more time and just create vehicle correction itself. Let's drop that. Right. Okay, that's good. So go back and execute. Right, now this time I got the employee, so vehicle ID, right? So I'm going to go and create previous vehicle for those previous employees as well, since I deleted those. Okay, so now if I go back here, I should have good three vehicle records. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I have three employee records. So you can see here, this employee ID shows as object ID. This employee is here, right? This object ID is coming from here. So now let's try to get the find all, right? So let's get a new request. Get all vehicles, right? It's a get request. It's easy. So let's say get all employees URL and put into get vehicles, and here vehicles, right? So now when you send this, now you will see the vehicle comes with the employee ID, right? So now in this case, yeah, let's say you need employee object as well, right? You need to tell who is this employee, right? And what you can do that in a simple way. You can go to repository, in the vehicle repository. You can say, hey, find and populate, right? Populate employee ID, right? To populate the employee ID. Okay, so now this way it will populate the real employee object, which is belongs to this one, right? So you can see here, yeah, now you can see the employee ID, it comes as this, right? So technically this is not right, because the response comes, it's a employee ID and this one. So what we can do is we can quickly rename this to employee, right? And but you can do like, you can keep this employee ID in the object, right? So and then like you can pass employee here, and you can map this when you assign the parameters, right? We learned this everything in the last video, so I'm not going to like do anything different here, right? You know, this is just a renaming and it's easy to done. And also now you know how you can write other way around, right? So when you get an employee, you can define, you can tell what other vehicles belongs to this employee, right? So for that, you can do, what you need to do is, for this employee you need to create a vehicle array, right? So in the vehicle array is nothing different, only the thing is here in this schema, here you use employee, the prop type like this. Only thing is you need to put this inside an array, right? So then it will realize, okay, this has to come as an array because it's a multiple, right? I know you can do that. And so I will push this code also to GitHub, so you can get this code and understand. But ideally you need to do this project separately yourself, so then only you can clearly understand, right? So one more thing, since I was talking about the promises, right? So let me to do one small thing and show you that. So if you go back to employee vehicle controller, let's do this here. How this works, right? So here let me to take this and assign it to a different variable and log this variable, and return it, okay? And return it, right? So now I'm not going to use async and await here, right? But it will work as expected, right? It will work as expected because I have async and await in my service and everywhere, right? So but let's see what it will print. I'm going to create a create vehicle. I'm going to create the same record again, right? Because I'm not interested to see that. So you can see is a promise pending, right? But it created this, right? So you can see here it created the fourth value, right? If you go back here, you will see here the value is created, right? So it's no any different, it's complete, right? But if you now I'm going to put the async and await, right? Async and await here, right? So now you can see here is a promise pending, right? The last time it was a promise pending, but this time it will print the clear object because the promise is resolved before you return that, right? So now you can see it's printing, right? That's what I said. It is not must, but it's a good, always good practice. You resolve the promises then and there, because when someone come later, when they put something, then your code won't break, right? Okay. So now, so far, we did almost everything what we need for NestJS to start the project with the NestJS. The pending thing is I'm going to talk about the security, how we can deal with JW token with this NestJS, and what are the best practices, how we can handle that. I will try to do this video very soon, and till that, if something is not working, pull my project and see what's wrong in your code, okay? So then make sure you subscribe to the channel if you not subscribed yet, and also share this video, and don't forget to follow me on the Facebook and Instagram so we can stay in touch. Then stay safe, take care.